So the Electoral College is how the United States of America picks its president. And you know that from the other videos and class. But I wanted to give an update on the Electoral College since the 2020 census. So remember, the Constitution says this is how we pick a president. It's not just whoever gets the most votes from the people that gets to be president. There's a special system that the framers put into the Constitution. But they also put in a part of the Constitution that says every 10 years we'll count the population. And that's called the census. Now, the census really doesn't get a lot of love in class, maybe because teachers might be in a hurry to get through things, but it's really a big deal. The United States Census is mandated by the Constitution. It happened in 2020. It happened back in 2010, the year 2000, 1990, 1980, 1790. It'll happen again in 2030. The census basically is a counting of everyone in the country as best as the government can do it. There's oftentimes a little bit of debate about whether we literally count every person, go to house, or use a formula. What about the homeless people? What about people who are moving? What about people who don't fill it out? Right? It's not perfect. Nothing in our government is perfect. That's why it says, in order to form a more perfect union in our Constitution. They realize this isn't a perfect system. No institution of man is perfect. But this is the best attempt the government has to determine how many people live in the United States. And once they count that up, it takes a year or so. Lots of people go out door to door. They send out lots of mailers. They try to do their best to figure out how many people live where in the United States, like in what state specifically. And they ask a lot of other questions, your education level, how many bathrooms you have in your house, a lot of things. But the number one thing they want to know is how many people live in that state that you live in. Because when they get that information, that determines several things. The big one is how many representatives your state gets in the House of Representatives. There are only 435 total, so they have to divvy that number up based on the population. Big states like California and Texas, New York, Florida, they obviously have more people. They get more reps. Some states will lose population over a 10-year period. Some people just move away. They don't like living where it's cold anymore. There's not enough jobs there. They might migrate from, say, Pennsylvania to Arizona. This happens a lot, and over a 10-year period, the population of the country can shift. So there was a time when a lot of people lived in the Great Lakes region, like Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, but that's shifting now that we have ways to get water and air conditioning to places in the South, especially in the Southwest. So the numbers have shifted. The population has shifted. So that determines how many representatives a state like Ohio or Indiana or Arizona or Florida will get. This counting of the population is really important. But remember, it has to add up to 435. The law is 435 is the cap. Congress passed that law back in the early 1900s. So it all has to add up to that. That's an important piece. Counting the people, determining where they live and what state they live, and then determining how many reps that state gets in the House of Representatives. Remember, the Senate doesn't matter. Every state gets 2, so it doesn't change with population. But the House of Reps does get shifted around every 10 years. Some states will lose reps. Some states will gain reps. Ohio just lost a rep, meaning we lost population, so we don't get as many people in the House of Representatives. States like Texas, they go up because people are moving there. But beyond just the House of Representatives, this has an impact on how we pick our president. The 2020 census shapes the Electoral College that's coming up in the next presidential election in 24 and then in 28. So the counting of the people not only affects the House of Representatives, but affects how we pick the president and what states have more say in picking the president and the vice president. So as a result of the 2020 census, some states are losing members of the House of Representatives and therefore losing some amount of power in the Electoral College. So as you see on this chart, states have lost some people. That means they lost some reps. That means their electoral number goes down. And you can see it's kind of color-coded by traditionally what party those states tend to go for. So Ohio has gone typically Republican for the last few elections, but we've lost a rep. New York has lost population. They typically go for the Democrats that are blue. They've lost a rep, and they've lost an electoral vote. So These states are still important. They're just somehow people aren't moving there, or if they are there, they're not staying there, at least over the last 10 years. Now, if they're not staying in Ohio or in Minnesota, where are they going? Well, according to the research that's come out from the census, these states are gaining population. Montana, Oregon, Colorado, Arizona, and North Carolina. So I guess people are moving to Montana. They're okay with the harsh winters. They figured out how to survive it. They've got enough supply chain and way to stay warm, so people feel comfortable living in Montana now. Same thing with Arizona. Maybe there was a time without air conditioning and fresh water, Arizona was no man's land, but now we've figured out a way. So people move there. They like being warm. So these states got one extra. Some states got even more. Florida is booming. Texas is booming. So they got extra reps, 3 for Texas and 2 for Florida, which means now their Electoral College number goes up. So just to review, everybody, when we add these up, every state's number is added up on the Electoral College Map. Remember, a state's number is their number of reps plus a senator. So Ohio, we have 2 senators and now 15 reps. It gives us an Electoral College of 17. If you added up every number on this chart, every state's Electoral College number, which is another way of saying their congressional number, you'd get 538, counting Washington, D.C. Remember, the Constitution says if you want to be president, you've got to win a majority of these states. So that means one more than half. So 270 is that magic number. But just take a look at the new map, because this is different from the map you would have seen in the 2020 election. Because by the election, we hadn't had the census all figured out yet. So this will really kick in the next presidential election. And remember, our timeline. Our timeline is that people vote in November. Your parents or you might go and vote in an election. And then whoever wins that state, Ohio or Indiana or Alabama, the electors for that state will meet in December in the state capitals in the Capitol buildings. So there you can see on the screen, you got New Mexico's Capitol building, Columbus, the state capitol in Columbus, Montpelier, and Helena. Every state will have this in their state capitol on the same day in December. And then on January, Congress will meet to count the electoral votes and declare a winner. So all of these states will send in a fancy envelope, and the Congress will open up these and count them. And that was what was happening on January 6th in 2021 when Congress was counting, and then there was an insurrection and a riot at the Capitol because some people didn't like the results or the perceived results in their minds. And then January 20th, the new president of the United States and the vice president will be sworn in. So remember, the timeline, November, December at the end of an election year. So that would be in 2024. That happens at the very end, right? And the new president and vice president would be sworn in the brand new 2025 or whatever. It's an odd year that they're sworn in. So the even year, 2024, you spend the whole year campaigning. And then at the end of the year, you have the vote. And by the time the new year starts, 2025, 2029, whatever it is, the Congress counts and the new president and vice president sworn in. Maybe you need to watch this a couple times, but it's important to remember the numbers have changed a little bit since the 2020 census, and who knows what will happen in the 2020 or in the 2030 census. The question is, where will you be at in 2030? What will you be doing? Deep questions.